Coming off a 34-3 demolition of the Clemson Tigers to open the season, Kirby Smart met with the press today to close the book on the season opener and take a look ahead to Tennessee Tech.
Yeah, excited to be here, excited to get moved on to pursue getting better. We open with Tennessee Tech practice today, and we'll start attacking these guys. They played a really hard-fought game with Middle Tennessee the other night, had a great comeback, and got a lot of respect for the way they played in that game for sure. And our guys will start getting prepared on them today.
Turn the page.
Yeah, Coach. When we spoke to you last week, you kind of talked about Clemson, and Carson talked about Clemson being a man-to-man football team that likes to send a lot of pressures as a defense. When that's the identity of a football team, they come out playing a lot of zone coverage to start the football game. I'm curious how you guys adjusted as a staff, and did that kind of catch you by surprise?
Not necessarily. They've been a pressure team, but they're not necessarily man-to-man pressure. They play a lot of forms of pressure, very similar to what we do in terms of zone, sims, and two traps mixed in with some man-to-man. And they probably played a lot of more single high, man and zone than they have in the past to load up on the run. But I wouldn't say anything our offense gets surprises us because we have a huge volume of defense. So they typically get exposed to a lot of defensive structures. But that's neither here nor there. You can do a lot and be no good at it, or you can do a lot and try to be good at it. It's a lot more about the players.
Well, at the end of the day, it always comes down to the Jimmies and Joes over the X's and O's. But I think Kirby makes a good point right there. It's last week in the preseason, or in the preview presser for the Clemson game, he said that he had a lot of respect for their defense because they looked a lot like Georgia's defense and what they do, the kind of personnel that they had, and so on. So essentially what he's talking about here is just the fact that adjustments in this game were really important. And it was one of those things where the first half, Georgia was running certain things to see how Clemson would respond to it. And then as the game moved on, and you heard Carson say this going into the half and then after the game, they knew they were going to adjust. And they tried to adjust on the fly. They certainly made the adjustments at the half. They came out in the second half, executed those adjustments the way you want to see the Georgia players do it. And we saw the end result there. So that's one of those situations where, yeah, they opened up in a different style, but we were sort of wanting to play it slow and then make adjustments as we go, and that's what they did.
Kirby, you were talking about the green dot helmet philosophy on defense. It's not necessarily the single color. Can you share who wore the green dot and expound on that? And will it be the same every week, or is that something that could change from week to week?
I hadn't really thought about it. I mean, we share who uses it every day in practice. I'll be honest with you, I don't even know. I mean, CJ had it some, Smile had it some, Raylan might have had it some. We have two helmets, so it depends on which pairing of players are in. We have other players that have green dot helmets in case they have to play a position that they're not normally playing. And we had a couple situations like that Saturday that we thought might happen with injury, so we had other guys ready and prepared to use the green dot. But as far as I know, we just had the linebackers using it.
And dominantly, that's how it's going to go. You're going to have your middle linebacker, and if they're not both on the field at the same time, they're going to make sure that whoever is your lead or most experienced middle linebacker is going to have that green dot and then execute the defense or spread the information across the defense from that position. So that's pretty standard. It is interesting to hear, though, that when you have to make adjustments and have players playing out of position, like the Dogs did on Saturday against Clemson in the secondary, that they could potentially use it a different way. So that's an interesting thought.
Coach, it looked like ARIAN Smith was very involved in the offense first two touches of the game, and not necessarily.
And Kirby looks tired.
Deep situation. Can you just talk about his development purely as a receiver and how much you guys are depending on him offensively this year?
Yeah, we want to depend on everybody because you don't want to be a one-dimensional team. So the idea is to, ever since we've been here, is spread the ball around. We've had a lot of guys with a lot of touches, nobody with a ton individually. And ARIAN's been a great case study in that because he's touched the ball vertically, he's touched the ball sideways, He's become a more complete receiver and route runner. I thought he made some plays out on the besides the rocket sweep things and the edge runs. He made some plays catching the ball outside, and that's big for him. That's growth for him, and we need more guys to step up and be able to do that. And we got to be innovative in ways to get touches that make us hard to defend.
That's a really good point there. And on the play, the little wheel route that they designed to get Arian down the sideline, that ball was thrown perfectly by Beck. Not in that it was a difficult throw, just that he was in rhythm and on time. Like, he got rid of the ball and got it to Smith in space where he could actually put his speed to use. And that comes back to scheme and just those two working together and getting to know each other. So I don't know that there's any player, and certainly any wide receiver, that Georgia fans or coaches want to see have success this year more than Arian Smith, because he had the injury history, then he had the bugaboo with his confidence. This is a kid who just works really, really hard and has made his mind up that he's willing to do the work, and now everybody wants to see him have some results. And if he does, that's going to be good things, mean only good things for Georgia this season.
Yeah, Kirby, any updates on Michael, Warren Brinson, Janelle Aguero going in this week?
Jonelle was close to being able to play, worked out before the game. Thought he might be able to go in an emergency. I don't really know today anymore. We just had a walkthrough. He walked through, and hoping he'll be able to go this week. Warren got a little bit of an ankle / contusion. Wasn't able to go. We're hopeful he's able to go. Michael has an ankle sprain. It's a grade 2, but it's stable. He'll be week to week. Probably questionable this week, but not going to be a long-term ankle, and we'll see.
Well, that's some good news and some big news there for the Dogs, because it sounds like all the injuries and players that we saw go down on Saturday are all going to be okay. It's just a matter of time. And Kirby made it a point to say, especially after what happened last year with Brock Bowers and his high ankle sprain that required surgery, that Michael's injury is a grade 2 sprain, which means, he rolled it pretty good. Like, it got twisted pretty good, but it's stable, which means that there's no need to do the tightrope surgery to make it so that it feels stable. He's good. It just takes a little rest and treatment, and he should be back. Brinson, they need him to come back. Brinson is a good player for the Dogs in the middle, especially in terms of depth. But playing Tennessee Tech this next Saturday, you got to feel good about the fact that maybe we can get those guys behind the frontline starters a few more reps, let those players rest themselves. Why not sit Michael this week and just let him heal up for what's coming down the road, because you have Kentucky and then Alabama. So go ahead, heal that thing up, be ready to go when we get back in conference is what I say.
This is sort of an off-topic question, but I'm curious. Obviously, so much of your time is devoted to today and this week and that sort of thing. But when you're thinking about, and it's probably more an off-season thing, the bigger picture direction of the program, whether it's how to navigate NIL or the portal or replacements for your coaches, what's your process for making those decisions?
All of them.
Maybe let's pick out the.
Just organizational conglomeration of information. I mean, I can't answer that question. Just I'm very process detail oriented. We have a way we go about things. We talk about it. We visit with others. We brainstorm. We do what any good business would do, and we try to make the best decision. But I mean, it comes to NIL, it's what can we raise? What do we have? What do we have available? What's the best value, and what kids fit our culture, and who's going to be unselfish and come here and play for University of Georgia and not just for the money. There's a lot of things that go into that decision, and those other decisions you talked about, there's a ton, especially in the off season.
I don't know that I've ever heard a more open-ended question right there, and Kirby addressed it, well. Which one, because like each one of those things obviously requires its own deft touch and is a different circumstance. So I do think it's cool that Kirby sort of mentioned there that he runs Georgia as an executive, like the head of a major business, multi-million-dollar business, because remember, Kirby was a business major at the University of Georgia, just up the hill from the J School, of which I'm a grad. And that just sort of informs his decision-making processes in everything. He just takes that idea, that concept, those concepts that you would have in the business world, moves them over here into the football world, and runs his organization in such a way that those two things look really similar.
Coach, now that you've had time to watch the tape, what were your thoughts on how Jared Wilson fared?
I knock on wood, I don't think we had an errant snap, and that was something that was really important. We chart his snaps every day, and he's been about 95, 96% snap accuracy, and that's something that you can't afford to have. It's got to be 100, and I thought he did a good job of doing that in the game. I think if you ask Jared, there's some things that he should have done better, he could have done better, and he didn't play his best football game, but like I tell kids all the time, if you miss time in training camp, it tends to show in the first game. And he missed some time. He did some really good things, some really athletic things, and then he had a couple plays that he did make. And I think he was the first guy that came up to me walking off the field and said he screwed up a couple plays. But that's football.
I like that. The accountability from Jared Wilson right there. I really like to hear that. I like to hear that he's trying to get better. But Kirby hit the nail on the head. If you miss time and it doesn't matter the position, that stuff's going to show up in the first game, and you're just going to have to work through it. The good thing is Georgia was able to, as Kirby pointed out, they didn't have any bad snaps or anything like that cost them a turnover, maybe lead to a score for Clemson on a short field or something. And you think 96, 97% on snap accuracy is good enough, right? But it's like he said, you want it to be 100%, right? Because it only takes one to get you beat. If you need further proof, just think back to what Alabama dealt with last year and their issues at the struggle or at the center position with him struggling to get the ball back to the quarterback consistently. So it is important. Every snap counts. There's nothing more important in the game of football than the ball.
Yeah, what does it say about London Humphrey's abilities to come in and make those big third down catches after just transferring into the program this offseason and even coming in for relief for Dylan Bell on Saturday?
Yeah, it's great. He does a good job. He's probably more in relief for ARIAN, and he did a good job. He's got SEC experience. I think that's what the portal provides you, to go get a guy that's been successful and played well in our conference. And he's done that. He's proven himself as a guy that can make plays, and he was ready when his number was called. And we talk about it all the time, is your opportunity's coming. Are you going to seize the moment when the moment jumps in front of you? And he did that.
That's what it's about, availability and opportunity. And obviously, it's so interesting that Kirby mentioned the fact that that's why they took him out of the portal. He's a proven kid that had played in the SEC, understands the league, and had done damage against what many people considered to be the best team from last season. Took a long play to the house against Georgia in Nashville last year. When he jumped in the portal, Georgia knew him. They knew he could get it done in the league. They knew he was a good football player and that he could get better. And that's how Georgia utilizes the portal, to add to what they already have on the roster and improve their roster overall. And it's interesting that Kirby would make that point coming off a game against a team whose head coach refuses to use the portal. And a lot of people are drawing a straight line between the performance you saw from players like London Humphrey's against Clemson to Clemson's lack of explosive plays, especially at the wide receiver position, being directly related to the way they use the portal. So interesting little nugget there from Kirby, but it's insight into how Georgia uses the portal and how they have been successful with it.
Kirby, after reviewing film, what were your impressions of Malaki when he played the star, and what kind of flexibility does that give you in personnel when he's able to play there?
He did a nice job when he played the star, especially for a guy that didn't rep there but last week a few times. I mean, he didn't get any reps in camp there, so he did a good job jumping in and filling that role. Flexibility, it just depends on the depth at other positions. I mean, Malachi can be our best player at 5 positions, so it's more a matter of what's around him and what's healthy, working, and what are we going to do defensively? You know, like he plays a role at safety, he plays a role at strong safety, he plays a role at star, so he does a tremendous job. It gives us some depth, but I'd rather not have to be relying on the depth and rely on the guys that practiced all camp.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful statement about Malachi Starks and just the kind of football player he is. There was a lot made about Caleb Downs leaving Alabama and potentially coming to Georgia. He wound up going to Ohio State, and everybody talked about how he was the best safety in the country. I would disagree. The best safety in the country is in Athens, Georgia, and it's Malachi Starks. And not only is he the best safety in the country, but if Georgia put him at corner, he would probably be their best corner. If they put him at star, he would be their best star. If you wanted to line him up and let him play wide receiver, he would probably start for this Georgia football team. That just tells you the kind of player that Starks is and the rare talent that he brings to the field every time he steps between the lines for the Georgia Bulldogs.
Coach, you said after the game, as far as Jalen goes, that coaches have had to get, I guess, uncomfortable in using him on the field. I just wonder, how many guys have you been around in your career who can go inside out like that with the ability that Jalen has, and what is about that skill set that makes him able to do that successfully?
Well, we're unique in our defense. I shouldn't say unique. I don't know how many others do what we do defensively because I'm not in their programs. So we're very different in regards to what NFL scouts and personnel tell us, that we still train, outside backers to be Sam outside linebackers, and learned a long time ago that you need to develop 2 skill sets because the game has changed and evolved to be more spread oriented. So these guys that played outside linebacker against a 2-back eye set, they weren't finding homes. They might have a home in the NFL, but they didn't have a home in college. And we make promises that we're going to develop you in multiple ways. I mean, going back to Natrez Patrick, he could play into the linebacker, and he could also play inside backer, and he was used to rush and do things here. Lorenzo was that way. Quay Walker started as an outside backer and inside backer and had flexibility. So we think it's part of your growth. We say all the time you're going to get 98% of your football reps in practice, so why not experiment and grow? And that 2% you get to play in the game, you get to show off all these things you learned, and then when the next level comes calling, they've seen you do multiple things, and it's really important to them that you can still play into the linebacker because their style of football still has some traditional nature to it, as opposed to college is very different now. So I'm very proud of Jalen because he's had to really grow and get uncomfortable at inside backer. He's more natural at his outside backer position.
That's really cool because there was a lot that actually was said there. I mean, Kirby laid it out for you. People talk about, well, how can Georgia get the top linebacker every year or the top 2 or 3 linebackers every year to come to their program when they know they're not going to play? He just told you. It's because they make promises that they're going to grow these young men and help them ultimately achieve a bigger goal, which is to play at the next level. They're going to help them become good at all phases of the game. And he listed off all the examples of how they've done it. The track record is there. So when you've got a guy like a Jalen Walker who came down essentially to Clemson and Georgia in his recruitment, he looked at the 2 and said, yeah, I'm supposed to be at Georgia. And he also has said just recently, I've never looked back. It was the best decision I ever made. And this would be why. Jalen Walker is a special player. He is setting up to have a fantastic season for Georgia this year because they're figuring out how to use him. And he was all over the field for the Dogs against Clemson, earning a collar from me as one of the beasts of the week for his performance. Led the team in tackles, finished with 1.5 sacks. The sky's the limit for Walker. So not only is he able to put on tape on game day the things he can do to be impactful immediately, scouts come to Georgia's practices. They see how hard they work and what these young men are being taught. And it's like Kirby said, you have 98% of your reps on the practice field. Go out there, get after it, put it on tape so the scouts can see it. I think there is a very, very real possibility that Jalen Walker is going to find himself being a first-round draft pick whenever he decides to go. Everybody thinks that we know that Carson Beck's going to be a number one. Michael Williams is probably going to be a first-round draft pick. I'm saying now, and I said it Saturday after the game, Jalen Walker could end up being yet another Georgia Bulldog linebacker that goes in the first round in the NFL draft whenever he decides to enter.
Kirby, what were your impressions of KJ in his first game?
KJ's very confident. He's played more football than most seniors. He's been playing since he was 6 years old in the heart of Atlanta, in one of the toughest leagues there is to play football, and he's played up against older kids all his life. He's extremely athletic. The moment's not too big for KJ. He's very gifted athletically, but he also has great football instincts and intuition. He's been coached by his father, and he's tough, and so I think that gives him a leg up on other guys coming in because he's just been playing football so long.
That's an interesting insight. It speaks a lot to who KJ Bolden is as a person, but also what a big deal it was when he decided to actually commit and come to the University of Georgia. Because much like Malaki Starks, he has everything you would want physically. And we saw against Clemson on Saturday that as a true freshman, he's willing to stick his nose in there and be an impact player for the Dawgs. So moving forward, given his history of competition, which is in the DNA of the Georgia football program, it's nothing new to him. It is completely fair to expect that he is going to continue to get better and better moving forward, and that's really good news.
Yeah, having a chance to review the tape, what did you see out of Damon Wilson in his first game against Clemson?
Effort, like I did last year. There's things he's got to improve on and do better. He missed a couple opportunities to make a couple plays that I thought he should have made. But he's, I don't judge Damon on that body of work of those snaps. I judge Damon on the body of work of the 1,000 snaps he's had in camp. And he's had a really good camp. He's improved himself physically. He can play more downs now. He's got to continue to get stronger and maintain his weight. But just the few snaps our guys didn't play many snaps. I think we had 56 or 57 snaps. So, we didn't have, I think we had 18 guys that played over 28 snaps on the whole team. So there weren't a large number of snaps played by anybody. So that body of work is not real big.
Well, the body of work may not have been big, but when I saw Damon Wilson on the screen, and he's one of those guys in that linebacker unit, that room, that I have been talking about all off season, and Damon in particular, because I said all along, if he can maintain his weight, I'm very interested to see what he can do with more opportunities being on the field on earlier downs, other than just being a third down pass rush specialist. When I saw him on the field, I immediately turned to my wife, Mrs. Beast, and I said, man, he looks good. I can't wait to see what he does. And then sure enough, you see him taking on blockers in the run game. You see him getting after Cade Klubnik in the pass. So I really, really am still very, very high on where Damon's headed. And if Saturday was any indication, he's going to have more opportunities the rest of this year. And I cannot wait to see what Damon Wilson does for the Dawgs. Another name, while I'm on the subject of that linebacker room, Gabe Harris had a phenomenal game against Clemson, just so physical. That's another young player in that room that I just expect to see the light to continue to come on, and he's going to make more and more plays as this year goes along. Depth is not an issue in that room. I just hope that as many people as possible get to make as many plays as possible, because it's like Kirby said, that rotation is strong, so those guys should be able to stay fresh and make play after play after play.
Yeah, Coach, you mentioned the snap count. That Clemson offense, I believe, led the nation last year in plays per game at 77. What was the key to limiting their amount of touches in the football, and were you surprised they huddled as much as they did?
I really don't know what their decisions are for their offense. It's when you stop people on third down and you're hard to run the ball on, you're not going to have a lot of snaps. And we were fortunate to get off the field on some third downs. They were also unfortunate. They had a couple drops early that would have gotten them rolling. So, it is what it is. As far as the snap count numbers, I think people with the headsets, you may end up with less plays than normal because of people wanting to wait and talk.
I think the most important thing he said right there should have been obvious if you watched the game, which is that Georgia shut down the Clemson run game. I think the number was something like, they held them under 100 yards clearly, but the average per rush was somewhere around 3 yards, 2.5, 3 yards per carry. And it just, when you can stop the run that way, it opens everything else up. And Clemson didn't have those threats that the Dogs were worried about outside. And what you saw was a boa constrictor approach from this Georgia defense. They just squeezed them until they crushed them. And that's how you end up with a score like 34-3.
Coach, you mentioned ARIAN's improvement, and he talks about in fall camp just becoming more consistent. I know it's only one game, but how have you seen him prioritize that?
Oh, ARIAN works. There's no harder worker on our team than ARIAN Smith. I mean, he's a product of a really tough physical program, and he'll tell you today he stands in front of the team, and he is just completely different person. He had never had to practice and strain like he does here, and he has made decisions that he wants to be really good, and so he works really hard at it. I mean, there's not a play that I can find where ARIAN doesn't run hard to the ball or try to block somebody and do something extra, and it's that way on special teams. He made a huge special teams play in the game and continues to improve by doing those things.
Like I said, man, nobody wants ARIAN Smith to succeed and have a big year more than the Georgia Bulldog fan base. Kirby Smart, his teammates, and of course, ARIAN wants to do well. But what Kirby touched on at the end right there, his presence on special teams is a huge reason why Georgia's kick coverage game is elite, like absolutely dominant. And that is going to pay dividends over the course of this season.
Kirby, what kind of jump have you seen from Lawson in his second year in the program?
More confident in the system, healthy, tougher and more physical, but needs to improve on that, and just a passion for the game. He's really, really football savvy. He understands football and leverages, and has made a lot of plays, in the passing game, and continues to play more physical.
Well, physicality, you can never be too physical at the University of Georgia. And it's interesting the way they used Lawson against Clemson. He actually, as far as in terms of where he was and how he lined up and the systems in which they used him, he filled the role of what Brock did last year for the Dogs. I'm not saying he's Brock Bowers. I'm just saying that when you looked at how he was used the way they used Brock last year. So I think Oscar Delp is a wonderful player. He is going to have big games and make big plays for Georgia this year. But to think that he is the only tight end that's going to make plays for Georgia this year, I think Kirby just let us all know that would be misguided.
Coach, just want to ask about Michael Morris. Didn't seem to get a whole bunch of snaps the other day. And also, I know the last couple of snaps of the game, you're able to get your redshirt freshman all in there for the first time. How big is that for kids like that to get a chance?
Hopefully, I mean, the work they get every day in practice. I mean, I know for you guys, everything is about that small snapshot you see of the game. But for me, it's what are you going to do today? What are you going to do tomorrow? Because you're going to get 40 or 50 snaps against a really good football player today and tomorrow. And we really try to impress upon our guys. There's so much value in our practice that it's held in higher esteem a lot of times by NFL organizations than the game is. And it's not understood by the common fan that practice is more important than the game, but it certainly is here.
I love that. That's wonderful because he's speaking to that culture of competition that Georgia has established. You need to get out there and work at practice. And if you do that, if you work at practice, then you're not only going to get better, but if you perform against those quality players every day at practice, then you are going to earn that playing time. And that's the way it should be. Playing time should be earned.
Micah's got to continue to improve. I mean, it's one of those deals that we're going to play the guys that practice the best, and if he practices better, he'll get to play more.
There it is, point blank.
Kirby, can you comment on Anthony Evans? And I'd agree about practice, so I'm hoping maybe we'll get some availability practice this week.
Keep hoping. What?
How about Anthony Evans on the punt returns and the importance that he had with field
I thought he
position?
did a great job of fielding the ball. The ball hits the ground and it bounces. And I watch all these games in college games where the ball bounces in 20 and 30 yards. Field position is getting flipped. You know, it takes a lot of confidence to go and judge the ball, especially in that dome. And there were some strange punts. There were some balls doing some crazy spin. It was a left-footed punter. So, you know, one of the wins of the game for us was not letting the ball hit the ground and bounce. He did once, and it went in the end zone, which was a judgment call by him. So I was very pleased with what he was able to do in terms of punt return.
Anthony Evans is somebody that I've spoken about a lot. He was one of the players that I think is going to make some big plays for Georgia this year in the return game. One of the reasons I think Georgia's special teams unit is going to show week after week exactly why they are so dominant. But Kirby hit the nail on the head. You don't have to make a touchdown returning play to have a great play, especially in the punt game, because that hidden yardage, when you play complementary football the way the University of Georgia does, that hidden yardage adds up. And Kirby is counting every yard. So every time that Anthony Evans made a nice catch to save the ball from bouncing and kicking 20 yards down the field, he's helping his offense and his defense. He knows that. He understands the game. And it is fantastic to hear that Anthony Evans, who knows he can make plays, is willing to play the game the way it should be played, complementary in nature, and helping the team win, and not just worrying about whether or not he has an opportunity to return the ball. Those opportunities are going to come, and I think Anthony's going to take advantage of them, but it is fantastic to hear that he gets it.
Two questions for you, Kirby. One, after your Mike Bobo was done after the game, being able to talk to Carson, what was the review of the whole headset thing? Did he like it? Could Carson hear? And the other one is from week 1 to week 2, what do you want to see as the biggest improvement among your football team?
I can't pick one thing on improvement. I mean, there's so many things that we got to do better. I mean, all of it. I mean, there's just a lot there that we want to improve on. And you know, some of what you're doing is dictated by who you play. And꯫ People just think it's a stat game. It's not a stat game. It's who you're lining up across from and how good is that football player, because that does dictate things, the matchups. In terms of Carson and Mike, I mean, we've done it every day for 32 practices. So it wasn't any different than the 32 practices that we did it. It shuts off at 15. You talk before it. It wasn't any different than our scrimmages. It was exactly like we practice, and we've had probably 60 walkthroughs. So between the walkthroughs and the games, we've got some form of communication. Walkthroughs, it can't be a helmet, so it's a earpiece, but he's heard it all.
It's an interesting point, but obviously it didn't show up in a negative way on Saturday.
Time here, going from game to game, where have you seen the growth among your players in that focus and mentality when you're going from opponent to opponent, no matter where they play or who they are?
Yeah, I don't know that I have this year because we haven't done it. You know, it's like every team's different in terms of, and over time they change. Like I can't compare 2018 to 2020 to 2022. I mean, because the teams are different. The maturity level, the experience level. It does seem that every year we get younger. So every year it's a greater burden and challenge on the older players to set the standard and hold people to how we go about our preparation and putting a game behind us and moving on to the next one. But it's the same for the coaches, and we don't change how we go week to week. We have a protocol, we have a checklist, and we follow that.
That's a good finishing point there by Kirby, because the question was about how do you keep your team level and preparing the same way regardless of who you play or where you play them. And he just said the coaches do it the same all the time, and it's difficult for the leaders on the team to step up and maintain that standard of preparation each week. And he doesn't know because this is only week 2. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Dogs show up and handle their business against Tennessee Tech, or if they come out a little sluggish, a little hungover. That'll be a key point to watch, and especially if they're going to be without a player like Michael Williams or maybe Warren Brinson, those guys that are a little bit older, who's going to step up and make sure that the players have the right kind of attitude, have their head right when they step on the field against Tennessee Tech on Saturday. That's it for this week's Presser Reaction. Enjoy the games, and until I see you next time, Go Dogs!
Told him, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told him.